Emmett always joked that abandoned places were the best cure for boredom, but Selena disagreed from the moment they pulled up to the Hollow Arches Motel. The place sat on an old highway far from town, with a sagging sign and boarded windows. Every local story said people working beneath it in the service tunnels disappeared long before the motel was finished. Emmett said those were just campfire stories told by drunks at bars. Selena, didn't. The parking lot was cracked and filled with weeds tall enough to hide stray animals. The air was heavy and warm, like the motel itself was breathing. Selena shifted uneasily as they approached the entrance. Emmett aimed his flashlight at the lobby window. The inside was dusty, but oddly untouched, as if someone had wiped the counters clean, but left everything else to rot. They climbed through a broken side door and stepped into the lobby. The smell hit first, something stale and metallic, like old nails soaking in water. Selena whispered that the silence felt wrong. The motel was supposed to be abandoned for decades, yet there was no graffiti, no trash, no signs of previous explorers. It felt preserved, almost guarded. They moved toward the hallway connecting the guest rooms. The carpet was shredded in long lines, thin and straight, as if something with sharp fingers had dragged itself along the length of the hall. Emmett brushed it off as water damage. Selena stayed close behind him. Room 1 had a mattress with long, dark stains. Room 2 had the walls stripped clean down to the wood. Room 3 was different. The air was cold as soon as they stepped inside. There was a bed, perfectly made, with a folded shirt and pants on top, like someone had just stepped out to shower. Selena said they should leave that room alone. Emmett checked the closet anyway. It was empty except for a pair of footprints in the dust. The footprints stopped at the back wall. Selena asked how footprints could end at a solid wall. Emmett didn't answer. Back in the hallway, a soft tapping noise echoed behind them. They turned, but no one was there. The tapping grew louder, steadier, like footsteps matching their breathing. Selena grabbed Emmett's arm. He told her it was pipes expanding, but he didn't sound convinced. They continued deeper, past a stairwell that led to the basement. The air around the stairwell felt colder, as if the darkness below was pulling heat downward. A faint whisper rose from beneath them. Not words, just a sound that trembled, like someone trying to speak with a numb mouth. Selena begged them not to go down. Emmett agreed for once. They reached the end of the hall, where room 12 sat slightly open. Selena pushed the door and froze. The room was wrong. The layout mirrored the first floor, but they were on the second. The furniture was the same, arranged the same way, but everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, except the floor, which had freshly placed footprints. The same pattern as the closet ones. Long strides, sharp heels. Not human. Emmett whispered for her to back up, but the door behind them slammed shut. The air shifted, heavy with something unseen moving close. The tapping began again, this time inside the room with them, slow at first, then quicker, circling them in tight loops. Selena lifted her light just as something brushed past her arm. It felt like skin, but too cold, too thin. Emmett swung his flashlight toward the bathroom door. It was cracked open, with darkness spilling through like smoke. A shadow shifted inside. Something stepped forward with a jerking motion, but no feet touched the ground. Its shape looked human for a breath, then wrong in all the ways a shape can be wrong. Selena screamed for Emmett to run. The shadow lunged, its tapping filling every corner of the room. They pushed the door and sprinted back through the hallway, every light bouncing wildly as the footsteps behind them grew louder and faster. No longer tapping, but pounding, as if something enormous had started. Running. They didn't dare look back. They only stopped once they reached the car. The motel was silent again. No pounding, no tapping, just the heat of the empty highway. Emmett started the car with shaking hands. As they pulled away, Selena saw it in the rear window, a human shape standing in the doorway, watching. Motionless. The next day, the motel was gone from the highway. Not destroyed. Gone. When they checked again that same evening, the road ended in trees. Nolan had always been calm on every hike he had ever taken, but Ivy could feel his nerves the moment. They stepped past the old wooden sign that warned travelers to stay out of the Red Pine crossing. The The forest swallowed sound in a strange way. Every step felt muted, and the air was too still for a summer afternoon. There were no birds, no insects, not even the wind brushing the branches. Ivy whispered that the whole place felt like it was waiting. Nolan tried to shrug it off, saying old forests sometimes had their own moods. Ivy didn't argue, though she stayed just behind him as they followed the narrow dirt trail deeper through the trees. The path looked used, but not by people. Strange patterns carved the dirt, long and curving, as if something heavy had been dragged through and then erased in sections. They reached the first marker, a rusted pole with a broken ranger symbol on it. Ivy noted claw marks across the metal, thin but deep, like something with too many fingers had scraped it. Nolan didn't comment. He just adjusted his backpack and kept moving. The deeper they went, the more wrong it felt. Ivy noticed the trees grew in unnatural patterns. Some leaned inward, forming arches over the path. Others bent at odd angles, as if they had turned to follow someone passing long ago. Nolan pointed out that the trunks near the ground were stripped of bark, each one marked by deep grooves, shaped like crescents. After an hour, they found the cabin. It squatted between the trees like it had been placed there by mistake. The windows were boarded up, and the door hung loose on a single hinge. Ivy hesitated, but Nolan wanted to look inside. He stepped through the doorway, and Ivy followed reluctantly. The interior was dim, but not completely black. The light from outside slipped through cracks in the boards, forming thin pale lines across the floor. The cabin smelled of cold ash and old sweat. An overturned desk sat in the corner. Papers were scattered across the ground, though most were ruined by moisture. A radio lay on the floor with its wires exposed, clearly broken. Ivy wandered toward a wall where long claw marks cut from the ceiling almost to the floor. She touched one gently. The wood felt newer there, like someone had carved it recently. Nolan crouched beside the broken radio and nudged it with his boot. Ivy told him to leave it, but he said he was curious. The moment he brushed the dial, the radio crackled to life with a burst of static dot. At first the sound was messy and garbled. Then a voice pushed through the noise. It was faint, but Ivy recognized her own name. She froze. The voice said it again, clearer this time, followed by Nolan's name. The sound wasn't human. It was stretched, like someone trying to imitate their tones from memory but getting the timing wrong. Nolan stepped back, eyes wide. Ivy grabbed his arm and told him they needed to leave immediately. The radio kept repeating their names in that trembling voice, almost like a call. They ran out of the cabin and back onto the path. For a moment, the forest seemed normal again. Ivy glanced behind them, expecting to see nothing. Instead, she saw movement between the trees. Something tall and narrow shifted behind her trunk, then slipped out of view. She grabbed Nolan's hand and urged him onward. They walked fast, but the deeper silence made Ivy's skin crawl. Nolan kept turning his head to listen. He said something was walking parallel to them, not on the path but matching their pace, somewhere in the trees. Ivy heard it too. Long, dragging steps, then a soft scrape, then more dragging. They broke into a jaw. Ivy looked over her shoulder and saw a shape again. It was thin, almost stretched, its limbs too long. The figure didn't walk. It moved in little jerks that looked painful. The worst part was its face. Even from a distance, Ivy could see the smile, far too wide for a human mouth. Nolan pulled her forward, and they sprinted down the trail. The creature kept pace without effort. Ivy could hear it now, whispering in a broken voice. It repeated their names just like the radio had, copying the way humans speak, but with something hollow twisting under the sound. They reached the entrance path and ran through the arch of leaning trees. Ivy didn't look back until they reached their car. When she finally turned to face the forest, it was calm and empty. The path behind them was clean, with no sign of footprints, no broken branches, no claw marks, almost as if the forest erased anything it didn't want remembered. Nolan unlocked the car with shaking hands. As they drove away, Ivy checked the rearview mirror. For a moment, she swore she saw a tall, thin figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching them leave with that same impossible smile. They never went hiking again. Finn always wanted to document every forgotten building in his town, and Maribel usually humored him. She didn't enjoy the abandoned places as much as he did, but she liked the calm he felt when holding his camera. The building they explored that afternoon was different though. It was an old apartment block scheduled for demolition in a few weeks. Everyone said the layout inside was confusing, but what bothered Maribel most was the single detail locals kept repeating. Somewhere in the building, there was a door that moved from floor to floor. A door with no handle. Finn laughed when he first heard the story. Maribel didn't. The front entrance of the apartment building was half collapsed, leaving a narrow gap they squeezed through. Inside smelled like wet stone and rotting insulation. Daylight filtered in through broken windows, but the hallways still felt too dim for midday. The air carried a faint humming sound, low enough to question whether it was real. Finn lifted his camera and began recording as they made their way down the first hallway. Every door they passed hung open, revealing empty rooms filled with broken furniture, moldy wallpaper, and strange stains on the floors. Maribel pointed out the peeling numbers on the doors. Each one had scratches near the handle, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. Finn said it was probably from vandals. Maribel doubted that. They reached the stairwell, where the humming grew louder. It sounded like someone breathing behind the walls. Finn said it was the wind, but Maribel shook her head. There was no wind here. On the second floor, the halls twisted in sharper turns. Maribel noticed the floorboards dipped slightly, almost like something heavy had paced back and forth over the same spot for years. Finn was distracted filming the strange ceiling patterns when Maribel grabbed his sleeve. The door stood near the end of the hallway. It had no handle, no lock, no hinges. Its surface was smooth and unmarked, except for a faint outline around the edges. Maribel whispered that they hadn't passed it on their way up. Finn agreed quietly. He stared at the door for a long moment, then reached out to knock. Maribel pulled his hand back and told him not to touch it. He argued that they came to explore, not stare from a distance. Maribel was about to insist when a soft sound came from the other side of the door. It was a gentle tapping, as if someone inside the room had responded to Finn's almost knock. Finn froze. The tapping happened again, slower this time. Maribel pulled him away and suggested they go up one more floor and leave if anything felt off. Finn agreed reluctantly. On the third floor, everything felt wrong. The hallways had no light at all. The windows were blocked by thick boards that looked too new compared to the rest of the building. Finn turned on his flashlight and scanned the corridor. Maribel felt something shift behind them. She spun around but saw only darkness. When they reached the center of the hallway, Finn stopped abruptly. The door with no handle stood in front of them again. Maribel felt her chest tighten. She grabbed Finn's arm, insisting they leave right away. Finn didn't argue this time. He looked pale, and his camera shook slightly in his hand. They turned toward the stairwell, but the hallway behind them felt longer than before. The shadows seemed deeper. Something scraped lightly along the wall near the far end of the corridor. They quickened their pace. Maribel kept glancing behind them, feeling eyes on her back. Halfway to the stairs, the tapping noise started again. It was close to close. Finn swung his light toward the source. The door stood only a few feet behind them, despite them walking away from it moments earlier. Maribel whispered that the door was following them. Finn didn't answer. His breathing quickened. He gripped Maribel's hand, and together they ran toward the stairwell. The tapping became louder, faster, almost frantic. Maribel didn't dare look back. They reached the stairs and hurried down, their footsteps echoing chaotically. Maribel felt the building shudder faintly, like something heavy had moved above them. On the first floor, they stopped for a breath. Finn turned to film the stairwell behind them. His light caught the outline of the door, with no handle standing silently on the landing, where no door had been before. Maribel's fear snapped into pure panic. She pulled Finn forward, insisting they get out immediately. They stumbled through the hallways, no longer caring about the debris or the broken glass. The humming grew louder, almost shaking the air. Something thumped behind the walls. Following their path, when they reached the entrance gap, Finn shoved his camera through first, then climbed out behind Maribel. The fresh air hit them like cold water. Both stood in silence, listening. The humming stopped. The building stood still and silent once again. Finn turned to look back inside through the narrow gap. Maribel pulled him away quickly. On their way to the car, Finn checked his footage. The last minute showed the door on the stairwell landing, but in the background, behind the door, something moved. Something tall and smooth, like a figure made of shadow, pressing against the wood from the other side. Maribel deleted the footage without hesitation. They never spoke of the building again, and no one ever saw the door with no handle once the demolition began. But workers said they heard tapping on the walls before the machines tore the building down.